Car people around the world, I think we can all agree that Volvo has been on a tear as of late, ever since they showed us the XC90 2.5 years ago. You know what, scratch that. It really goes back to 2010, when they first developed not just new cars, but an approach to build those new cars. And the latest is the Polestar 1, which is, are you ready for this? A 600 horsepower coupe that has 737 pounds of pulling power, has 93 miles of electric range, and most importantly, it is built with all the same pieces that are on current road-going Volvos. Now granted, the fancy carrying case is a virtual, mirror clone of the concept car that spawned the S90, which brings us to today's episode. All of those bits that make up the 600 horsepower fancy coupe are in the latest S90. In this one, it's not just about electrification or more power or some other bits that have changed. It makes this whole thing more uptown, which is the theme of today's episode. So I tried to do a count. How many times have you and I been through this plug-in hybrid dance before with Volvos, specifically the twin-engine type? And I think it's been 2 times, but never in a 4-door sedan. First time ever, so why don't you and I will just stop. We're in hybrid mode right now. Let's just stop and go into the full-on electric version. I've got a full charge here, so I got 21 miles of range. And let's try this thing, a sedan. Not an XC60, not an XC90, a sedan, 4,700 pounds. And let's try this thing around town, because effectively that's what you're going to do with a plug-in hybrid. I don't care how fancy it is, that's exactly what you're going to do with it. Now I'm not going to put my foot to the floor because that's going to engage the gasoline engine no matter what system I got here. And not only do you feel the power, or you don't feel an engine that is 4 cylinders that's working too hard. As a matter of fact, let's turn in here and let's go around the neighborhood a little bit and let's invoke a little bit more stop and go. So let's turn again. Now we're in Hermosa Beach. And it's almost effortless. That's the difference between the full electric motor, and again, let's come to a stop, and the gasoline motor in the Volvo. So the second thing you notice in terms of pulling power, really in this case, it's pushing power, because what's happened now is this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Okay, but I know what you're thinking. It's got a total system horsepower of 400, which is sizable. 87 more horsepower, mainly from that electric motor, over the regular S90 we've driven now twice now. So with it, let's just put, there's a Bentley coming up here. Let's do a little drag race. Do not tell anybody or try this at home. Do a drag race with a Bentley, 4-cylinder, got the gas going, and yeah, it's definitely faster than the regular S90. And now we're at the point of the episode where I need to admit something. I am incredibly biased when it comes to Volvos because I grew up on Volvos and still have a soft spot in my heart for Volvos. But even I, Mr. Bias that loves all cars Swedish, can see one glaring fault here, and that is the infotainment system. Not its design, not its graphics, and especially not the way they're able to blend their UX with the UX of either Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. The struggle is how it all works together. And the biggest way to demonstrate this is to start the car up. When you turn the switch, the knob off to the side and get the thing going in the morning, this system, no joke, takes almost a minute to 2 minutes to get fully functional, meaning to the point where you can start the fan, turn on the heated seats, play around with the radio, interact with your Apple CarPlay system, where it's functional. Yeah, you can move the car right away, but this is abnormally slow. I don't know if it's the processor, I don't know if it's the UX, or maybe teething problems, because this was a lot of new to put into a car that itself was new only 2 years ago. Perhaps the suggestion here is to do some more UX testing, maybe make it a bit sharper, because this is the only thing holding an otherwise great infotainment system back. I would argue this is a much more supple car to drive than the previous S90 to 17, which has 5 inches less in length. So ultimately, around town, especially when you're doing high-speed driving, it is so much more, again, supple is the best way to describe it. Then there's the second piece, and that's the additional propulsion system. Here, it's almost negligible, because at the end of the day, the batteries are here. Yeah, you've got an extra 500 pounds, but you also have an extra 87 horsepower to get the thing going, so you don't feel an impact in terms of the overall around town or acceleration. What you do feel an impact is, let's say for the sake of discussion, I want to do a U-turn here. Please don't try this at home. You feel a little bit of lean, more so than you would in the S90 ICE. And that's really a function of just the weight more than anything else. And with that, we've come to the point of the episode where we need to focus a bit more on electrification, specifically the benefits. And they are two. There's obviously the full EV range. Volvo rates this for a whopping 21 miles of electric driving. However, I have some news to report. With my fancy-dancy home Bosch charger here, I've been able to do 23 full EV miles in this very car. And then there's the MPG. Now let's be very specific here. We're not talking MPGE, we're talking MPG. So what the federal government rates this and its T6 ICE equivalent. Remember the car we drove in Spain and its virtual like clone we drove here a couple of months ago in California? That is rated for 22 in the city, 31 on the highway. That's 4,200 pounds and 316 horsepower. This 4,700 pounds and 400 total system horsepower is rated for 26 in the city and 33 on the highway. Knowing those numbers, is that enough to justify the extra cost, weight, and complexity of the T8 system? So a couple of notes. I know we talked about in the tech review the whole wheelbase and the changes of 5 inches, but what does that translate to in terms of usability back here? Well, the actual space that I have as a passenger goes from 35.9 inches to 40.4. Now, it looks kind of odd here, but this is where you have all sorts of toys. You can control this seat here from the back, and I can actually put this seat back forward. That's actually pretty cool. I can play around with this, the sunshade here, as well as the sunshade in the back. And then some of the details, man, we've talked about this in other Volvo episodes where we've geeked out about the satin finish wood. Well, here with this is not so much a full-on brown as a saddle. The combination of the saddle with this satin finish wood really stands out, especially now with this revised armrest that has the satin finish wood all around this leather-covered armrest here. Then we have to switch back to that whole electrification thing because there's obviously a battery. Now, in the first twin-engine Volvo that we drove, that was the XC90 with 2.5 years ago, that was a 30 kilowatt-hour battery. But with the XC60 and now this, all of the twin-engine T8 systems, whether it's an XC90, an XC60, or this S90, they move to a 65 kilowatt-hour battery. And then there's one other interesting change here in the S90. The gas tank is smaller by 3 gallons. I'm thinking that's a weight savings thing. And then there's just real-world use here. Remember we had that S90 we drove, 2-3 months ago, and I had 5 people in that car going down to Angel Stadium to see my girlfriend's beloved Baltimore Orioles. And I gotta say, that was a tight fit. But this, I know in theory this was designed for the Chinese market, and I'm not gonna tell you the recap of why they do that, but the extra 5 inches, it makes this whole thing, forget about electrification and fuel efficiency and all that kind of stuff, it makes this whole interior work better. Yes, you notice it when you drive, but it makes the interior work so much better. So for the past 2 episodes, I have yet to share one rather important fun fact with you about this very S90 sitting here, serial number ending 341. It is an Uptown inscription model, which means it's pretty much loaded to the gills. It also means that it's almost 80,000 US, 80,000. So put that in focus with these 2 big changes, the wheelbase and more importantly, electrification. And I'm kind of surprised I'm saying this, but those 2 changes make this entire package immeasurably better, because put aside the marketing mumbo jumbo of premium, it just delivers what a luxury car should better with the electrification and the longer wheelbase. Now with that, not all is perfect in Camelot. The 23 miles of range, which is the highest I got in my entire time with it, simply not enough, especially at 80 grand. Come on, throw me a bone here. I am very certain that the folks like Stefan at Volvo, who you guys have met, could tweak this somehow and get this package to be at least like a Volt. Give me like 50 miles of range, because then the electrification is not just a gimmick or something to get around taxation in other countries. It's actually usable in today's infrastructure. I mean, I could drive it around town with 50 miles, or I could take it up to San Francisco. If you could do that for me, I'd be really appreciative. Until I see you next time, bis später.